listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Range Minded Podcast, where you can find extra links and follow along with the conversation. This is episode 148, a very special episode where we have State Senator Christy Zito on as a guest. She talks with us about her stance on the Second Amendment, the legislation that she has introduced and worked on in the state Senate, and what us normal citizens can do to make our voices heard. This was a fantastic episode, and we hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy episode 148 of Range Minded, the Christy Zito interview. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long, and I am joined as always by...
Hey, this is Steve Zimmerman from the Western Front.
Yeah, how are you, sir?
Oh, sorry, Eastern Front.
I was going to say.
Boise. I'm in Rigby. I don't even know my directions. That's how you know I'm from Rigby.
You're on the other side of the state, but you're still here with us. And
I'm on the cold side.
We are also joined by Nick Hoffer of Hoftech Industries as well.
He didn't want to introduce himself.
I am on the Western Front.
Right.
It's freezing over here.
It's colder than it has been.
Crimea River.
And Steve, we have a very special guest with us as well. Steve, why don't you introduce our very special guest?
We do have a special guest, and we're so excited to have her. We have Representative Christy Zito with us tonight. And Christy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and how you got excited to be in politics?
Okay, well, I would love to, but first, for full disclosure, I'm a senator.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, it's all good. And I hate to even make that correction, but you kind of have to. I mean, you can just call me Christy and that's all good. But,
okay.
Please correct Steve at any opportunity.
Well, I need all the correction I can get, so.
Yeah.
Man, now I feel guilty.
Well, Senate of the Idaho Senate, Christy Zito is joining us.
Yes, even better.
And we are honored and very thankful for your time. And thanks for joining us. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself just to start.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and to be able to visit with you. I'm a mom and a grandma, and I've worked in the fields and on the farm and such most of my life. That's what I've done, and raised a bunch of kids, and now I have grandkids. Politics was the farthest thing from my mind. I would never, ever, ever have dreamed that I would be in this position. But just like being on your show, I'm really honored to be able to serve the people. It's quite an experience. I think that everybody should have the opportunity to sit in these seats and see what happens and what goes on and how the process takes place. It's just really an amazing thing. And the people I've got to meet and the associations that I've made, there's just not really anything like it.
Sure. And I'd have to say Idaho is probably a really special place to be in politics, right?
It is. Idaho is just a special place to be in general.
Sure. Sometimes
the politics aren't that different, really, than any place else in the country. You know, we have to be honest about it. And our gun legislation sometimes is a pretty good snapshot of that. So.
Sure, and that's what we're kind of going to be talking about today. Is I think you're involved with some firearms legislation in Idaho, and I think that's going to be the focus of our conversation. But figure we talk about firearms just kind of in general as well, and your association with them, and and go from there. So
that will be great.
Yeah, Steve, why don't you lead us off? I'm sure you have a lot of questions.
So I read, the reason why I contacted you the other day is I was reading one of your posts, and I saw some legislation that you were going to bring up or have brought up. Is it the Second Amendment Protection Act? Is that correct?
Right. We call it the Idaho Small Arms Protection Act. Small
Arms Protection Act. Uh-huh. Okay. Tell us about what's in that and what it entails and how that's going to help us gun-toting Idahoans.
Okay. Well, Idaho, as you probably know, is already a Second Amendment sanctuary state. That was done in 2014. But since that was done, there have been some circuit court decisions that have kind of let us know that it's not 100% sufficient to do what we would really like to see it do. We cannot null and void federal gun law that's already been in effect. We have the Supremacy Clause and some Supreme Court and some, like I said, some circuit court decisions that have proven that to us. And the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance attorney, Alex Kincaid, she actually is in the middle of some cases now defending Idahoans who thought that they didn't have to obey federal law. So just so you know, you can't we still have to obey that federal law. But what we've done is, because we can see what is going to happen on a national level, we've already heard the new president say that he would like to see arms like the AK-47 and such banned. They're talking about taxes. They're talking about limiting capacity and such on magazines and things like that. And so what we've done with this, and I believe it's kind of unique, I don't think there are very many other pieces of legislation or law like this in other places in the country. So are you familiar with the Prince Mack versus the United States decision?
I am not.
Okay, so Richard Mack was a sheriff in Arizona, and federal agents came into his county, and I believe they expected him to enforce federal law, and he said no. So there was a court case over it, and the Supreme Court ruled that the sheriffs did not need to help enforce federal law, that they didn't need to do that. So what our legal counsel has done is, coming from that decision in our Small Arms Protection Act, the first part of it, we declare legislative intent that in Idaho, we know that the Second Amendment is the law of the land, the supreme law of the land, and that we honor and respect it. You know, that the several states are sovereign, independent states. We state that the people of Idaho have vested the Idaho legislature with the authority to regulate the manufacture, possession, exchange, and use of firearms within the borders of this state, and that they are subject only to the limits imposed by the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution and those of the state of Idaho. And so we wanted to make sure that we had, clear explanation of our legislative intent, and I'll get to that in just a second why. So then we list some of the different firearms that are protected and that we deem necessary for the preservation of life and the pursuit of happiness and such in the state of Idaho. So then the meat of the thing really, though, is this, that the Attorney General of the state of Idaho would be directed to defend these laws and to protect the rights of the citizens of the state of Idaho if there were to be a challenge, that he would be directed to take that to court and to defend a court challenge against that of these unlawful laws that could come in, and the unlawfulness of federal agents coming in and forcing or directing or whatever our local law enforcement to help them enforce those laws or to protect citizens from that. And that's kind of unique that we have that in there. And then also something that we've done that's unique is, if the Attorney General would choose not to, then the legislature, by concurrent resolution, could choose a member of the legislature to have standing in court to do that. And then that representative of the legislature could choose legal counsel to defend that in court. And so wow. I think that's kind of unique, and I think that's an excellent protection. Because it just says that, as Idahoans, this is what we believe, that the Second Amendment is necessary, that we uphold it and support it, and this is what we're going to do to see that happens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So have you... Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead. It's all you.
I was going to say, what's been the reception with other elected officials with this? Have you got a lot of warm welcome? Have a lot of confused people, really negative people? What have you seen in Boise?
Well, we've asked the chairman of the Senate State Affairs Committee to give it a hearing. We've met with her.
Awesome.
I've sent her some emails and stuff. We're kind of getting caught in this game of, well, you have to go talk to this person about it and get their blessing and see what they want, which we've done.
Frustrating.
It is frustrating. Senator Harris from the Soda Springs area, he suggested that in our description that we be sure and include reloading components and supplies.
Oh,
and
nice.
That was a really good suggestion.
Yeah, it's smart.
And we put that in there. Yeah, it is. In fact, in some other legislation that we've talked about doing on a state level to protect our rights during an emergency, we had that put in and to make sure that our gun rights in general during an emergency were protected. But Senator Harris suggested that, and we put that in, and we have taken suggestions from other legislators about what they might want in it or what to take out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that. So we're kind of playing that game now. We have a lot of co-sponsors in the House of Representatives in Idaho that have signed on. I haven't counted how many. Just let me 1, 2, 3. 10, 12, 13, 14.
So this is actually a good time. I have a few questions that came from Instagram, and one of those questions we're kind of going over now is what kind of opposition to Second Amendment bills and rights is there in our local legislators? And I guess we're kind of going over that now, but would you say that most are in favor of these types of bills?
I think generally they are, because when it finally gets to a floor vote or when they finally get to committee vote, the Republicans will vote for them. It's getting them there that can be really tough. If you stop and think about it, what did it take, 4 or 5 years or more just to get constitutional carry to where it is today in the state of Idaho?
Yeah.
I worked on it 4 years, and I believe it was at least 4 years before that Greg Pruitt and the Second Amendment Alliance worked on it. So you would think it would be a no-brainer in Idaho. You think that it would just be, okay, this is the right thing to do. The Second Amendment says shall not be infringed, period. So on a state level, we should not infringe it to the greatest extent that we possibly can. But just like this, let's just read the bill, take it at face value, see what it does. If we agree with it, let's get it a hearing. If we don't agree with it, be specific and tell us what you don't like about it, what you think won't work,
Sure.
so that we can get it tweaked or get it fixed, or run it through the process with the legal counsel. And we've had attorneys specialize in different areas. So the attorneys that have worked on this specialize in Second Amendment. We didn't just go out and get like a land attorney or someone who deals with adoption, for example, or whatever. Not that those aren't important. They are. But these are Second Amendment attorneys that worked on this. And
they understand the purpose and the why.
Yes, exactly.
That's awesome.
So that's where we're at with it. We're just waiting to have that hearing. And probably if we don't get a hearing on it here by the middle of the week, if we can't work that around, we have a meeting with one of the senators that the chairman said we needed to meet with to get their blessing on it. And our legal counsel is coming in to discuss it with them, so that they can attorney talk and get to the meat of what might be the problem. And if we may have to start it on the House side, because the chairman of House State Affairs, Representative Crane, he told us that he would give it a hearing and that we could start it over there if we needed to. But, I'm a senator. It's just a courtesy, or maybe that's not the right word, but that's the only one I can think of right now, to start it on the Senate side, for them to have the opportunity to say, yeah, let's do this. Let's get it done. Let's support the Second Amendment. Let's support the gun owners of our state.
Right.
If we can't get that to happen there, then we'll start it on the House side and do that battle when we get done over there.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the blessings of having two houses of legislation, is that if it doesn't maybe start in one, it can start in the other, and then it's got maybe more of a chance to get through. I'd say that's an advantage.
Well, it is. And the process, if you think about really the thought that went into the process of representative form of government, it really is amazing how it's set up. You have the House and you have the Senate, and they really are, I've served on both sides, they really are they have completely different personalities.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
The House is lively and let's get stuff done, and they're kind of raucous, and the Senate is more deliberative. They tend to be a little more thoughtful to put the brakes on. Not that the House isn't thoughtful, because they are. I'm not taking anything away from the legislation that comes from either side. I'm not. It's just different. It's a check and balance all on its own.
Sure.
And it's a good thing. So we'll just navigate that process in whatever way we need to get this done.
Sure.
Because it's important. Especially with what we're seeing, by executive order and in Congress and stuff, it could get pretty ugly for us.
Sure.
Not just on the Second Amendment, but on all of them, really.
Right. Well, let's talk about, you said you grew up on, and spent some time on a farm in that kind of area. Let's talk about kind of your personal history with firearms and what makes the Second Amendment so important to you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes, I absolutely can. We grew up with firearms in the house. My dad didn't hunt a lot, but we always had them. And then as my family grew, when my boys and my daughters got to be old enough, I got them a BB gun, and then they got shotguns, and then they got rifles. And so it's just always kind of been a part of the culture of our life.
Yeah.
But I do have a specific story. I do know what it is to have to raise your firearm with the intent to defend life. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard my story before, and if you would like, I'll share it if you would like me to.
Yeah, if you're comfortable sharing it, we'd be more than happy to hear it.
Okay, yeah, I'm comfortable with it because I think it's important. I think it's important to know. When we do gun legislation, we'll always have the moms come in that are against it. I think they call themselves Moms Demand Action and stuff. But for women, gun rights are women's rights for so many of us. Because no matter how you look at it, physically, we are not as strong as a man. We just aren't. And sometimes that firearm is the equalizer. So my daughter and I, she was 11 at the time. I have two daughters, but this was my youngest. She was 11 at the time. And we were on our way home from a baseball game. My middle son played baseball. Mm-hmm. And we were probably 300 miles away from home. And there was this truck that was following us, and they'd pull up beside us and then fall back and pull up beside us. And, I thought it was just maybe they didn't have the power to pull the hill or whatever. I didn't think a whole lot of it. So we started into a canyon where there was construction, and they forced us off the road and into a place where I couldn't back out and get away.
It was scary.
And it was scary. And the two men got out of the truck and started towards our truck. So what I did is I had my .38 on the console, and I looked at my daughter and I looked at my gun, and I knew that I had to do something because, it's amazing how many thoughts can go through your head in just a matter of a second.
Sure.
And I knew if I picked that gun up that I had to be committed to pull the trigger if I had to, because I'd had enough training to know, and I had been taught that if you do have a firearm and you're not committed to use it, you better not show it because it could be used against you in a situation like that.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in that split second, I put my hand on the gun, I made that commitment, and I looked at my daughter, and I knew that if I didn't defend her life, or if she had to witness or experience something heinous, how would I ever explain to her that her mother didn't defend her?
Man.
So I picked the gun up, and I held it up so that they could see it. I didn't point it at them, but I held it up, and I looked at them with a look that let them know that Mom would pull the trigger. And they looked at the gun, and they looked at me, and they got in their truck and left.
Wow. That's a scary situation, man or woman, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, what would have happened if I wouldn't have had the firearm?
Sure.
Yeah. There was no way for you to defend yourself.
No. And I'm 5'2", and I'm farm girl. I'm farm and ranch raised, so I think I'm relatively pretty tough, and I can be pretty scary if I need to, but not that scary and not that tough. So that firearm, as far as I'm concerned, either saved our life or saved us from some horrible event.
Right.
And you said they were out of their vehicle. Is that what you said?
Yes, they had gotten out of the vehicle and were approaching my truck. And I mean, we're only talking a couple of steps because they had blocked us in and were close enough that I couldn't move.
So they were fully committed to whatever they had in mind, and the only thing from what you've told that stopped them was them seeing you holding a firearm, and that's a big eye opener to some of the people that say, well, why do we need a gun? Well, that right there kept you from getting into any type of physical altercation, period.
Yeah.
I believe so. I honestly believe that it did.
Sure.
Because there was no other reason. I don't think they even suspected that there was a firearm in the vehicle.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, it's a sobering story for sure.
Yeah. That's so scary. That makes me just nervous thinking about it even after the fact, how quick things happen and how important it is to make a commitment to either have a gun with you or when you do carry it to be willing to use it.
Right.
That's those are big commitments, and I think a lot of people don't take it as serious as they should.
And I think on the flip side of that, sorry, just really quick. So I think that right there is a great example of why it's so important that we do carry our firearms and that we do get the training that we need, like we always talk about. But all the time, it's very rare that we meet people in our day-to-day life that have a story where they've been in a situation where they truly needed to use their firearm. And it's sobering to actually hear those stories and see how just having a firearm with you kept you from getting into a situation that could have been deadly or even more traumatic for the rest of your life than it was for them to get back in their car and leave because you had that firearm with you.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There's just no question. And I agree with you. Training is so important. If you're not willing to go get the training, don't get the gun. But once you make that commitment to get the gun, please get the training. And then understand, especially I was told in my training that especially as a woman, because that's what I'm 5'2". I would never have the physical strength that a man would have. It's just the way it is. You just don't.
Yeah, just a reality.
When you pick that firearm up and they see that you have it, you have got to be committed to use it, or it will be taken from you and used against you. And so, when you're thinking about it before I knew I had it, I knew it was there, I knew I would use it to protect us if I needed to, but there's something different about making that commitment at the moment.
So
and once you pick it up, you are committed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think that experience has pushed you more into being an advocate for the Second Amendment than you were before that?
I don't know that it has made me more of an advocate, but what it has done is it has given me an understanding in real life why it's so important. And it has put me in a position that when people say, well, you don't need a gun to protect yourself, or, why do we need guns? The Second Amendment's outdated. It's this and that. I have a real life right now reason and explanation why it's so important. And right. I think, sometimes we look back on things that happen in our life and at the time you're thinking, oh my gosh, why did God put me there? Why did he put me in that position? But now I can see why. And being in this position, for me, it's a calling. Maybe some people seek public office and, want to be that person. They see it as maybe on a pedestal or something like that. But for me, it's not. For me, I would not have looked for this myself. I really believe that God has put me here, and that all of my life's experience, and especially that one at that moment, brought me to this point today where I can stand up for the citizens of the state of Idaho, and I can say, yes, the Second Amendment is important. It goes beyond hunting. It goes beyond sports. It is to defend and protect our families, our homes, our state, and even our country if necessary, whatever. It is a form of protection, and that we have that right to life and to liberty and to pursuit of happiness. And that Second Amendment protects that.
Yeah, awesome. I don't think any of us could agree more, really.
Well, while you've been in the, working in Boise, are there senators or any representation even on the other side of the aisle that are in favor of this legislation as well? Are you seeing stuff happen on both sides of the aisle, or is it pretty much just a party decision?
Most of the time, it's a party line vote. I think there might be some in the other party that would maybe agree with it. I don't know. No one said anything to me, but typically it's a party line vote. Senator Bayer, she's the only other senator that has signed on with us. I think we have 22 representatives that have signed on to co-sponsor. So, and we'll just keep working it, and I keep talking to people and asking them, and I'm going to keep pushing for a hearing. I'll do whatever I can do to make this happen for the citizens of our state, because it is important. We must protect that right, and we must do everything we can within the bounds of the law to make sure that right is not infringed.
So is there anything that the citizens can do to help get people to sign on to that bill?
Call and email. Call and email your representatives, your senator. You can even call and email other senators and representatives. The Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, on their website, they have a link actually that you can go to and email and your representatives and your senators, if you choose to want to do something like that. Or you can go to legislature.idaho.gov, and the email addresses and some phone numbers of all of the representatives and senators are on there. And just let them know how important this is to you, and let them know that as your representative and representatives of the state, you want to see this passed. And when it comes down to it, the only political pressure that a lot of people in office feel is the threat of not being elected to office again. And that's what confrontational politics is, and that's an important concept. And I think sometimes it's one that's missed. Just because you have access to your elected representatives, that doesn't necessarily mean you have influence. Because really the only influence that you have to exert is the ballot box. And I'm not saying you should threaten or anything. I'm just saying sometimes a gentle reminder about that helps.
Perfect. And I'm looking at the link that you just sent me, or said, at the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, and it says it calls it the Second Amendment Protection Act, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. You're listed down here at the bottom. So yeah, we will post that link for you guys to follow as well. So definitely do that. And I know I did have some questions about the emailing and calling, and that kind of hit that as well. So yeah, and I don't know if we're going to touch on it. Steve, did you have questions on some of the stuff that was going on in Washington with HR 127? I know I had a bunch of questions about what Idaho's response to that is.
Oh, federally,
one of our listeners, his name is Michael Garski, he asked specifically about HR 127 and your thoughts on whether it has any traction, if you think it has a chance, and what do we do after the fact?
I think it has traction simply right now because of the makeup of Congress. Mm-hmm. The only thing that might save us are some of the Democrats that are from more moderate areas. But I hate to say that it wouldn't pass. I really do hate to say that because I really think it would. And then my other concern is even if it doesn't pass, there's executive order.
Yeah.
So that was that was something that two people today while I was out to lunch mentioned to me when we were talking about that bill. And they said that it was rumored that even if it didn't pass, that the president would invoke it by executive order despite not passing.
Exactly. And that's my concern, that if they can't get the traction to get it through Congress, that executive order, that he could sign executive order. And, there's question as to whether executive order really could be executed in that way or not. But I don't think we really want to wait to see. I think the whole idea of the Small Arms Protection Act is to be as proactive as we can possibly be to thwart whatever might come our way.
Sure.
And, our state sovereignty is important. And this legislation does exert our state sovereignty. And it talks, not only that, but, in the bill, it talks about the federal government's ability to lay taxes and why it's wrong. And our state constitution actually prohibits taxing of firearms and magazines and stuff like that aren't done across the board on an equal level. And it talks about taxes that would make it harder or dampen your excitement or ability to be able to purchase firearms, magazines, supplies, and equipment. So we're being as proactive as we can because I would not put anything past the president and the Congress that we have right now.
Yeah.
We know that one of the reasons that our country has been free and one of the reasons that our state has stayed in as good a shape as it has and with as low a crime rate and stuff as we have is because we are an armed people. And that has been a great deterrent to a lot of crime and to a lot of mischief that could take place. And it's important that we protect that and that we defend that.
Well, what do they say is
on
that,
whatever level we have.
Sorry, what do they say is that an armed society is a polite society?
Yes, that's I've heard that.
Well, let's talk about you mentioned talking about you had training and you were of the school of thought, which I think all of us agree is that if you don't have the training, you probably shouldn't be carrying that firearm. Tell us about kind of the training that you've got and how that's kind of helped you feel more confident maybe with firearms or how that's helped you in your firearms journey.
Well, my training really started, like I said, as the youth, as a child.
Sure.
My dad, he wasn't a big hunter or anything, but we always had them. We lived on a farm. And so, sometimes it was necessary to keep a dog out of the chickens or whatever. And I know that sounds elemental, but we were trained to respect them. And we were taught that they take life, that it's not a toy, that it's a protection for us, but at the same time, that it will take life. So my training started really young. And then when I got older and decided I was going to carry, and to go beyond just hunting and sport shooting and stuff like that, when I was going to carry, I took a concealed carry class. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot in that class. That's where I learned about, you have to be committed. I learned a lot about the law. That's important as well, to know, what you can do and what you can't do.
Sure.
To understand firearms law is very, very important because that's how you keep yourself out of trouble. Because as much as we would like to just say, shall not be infringed, period, that's not the practical reality of our situation.
Right, yeah.
So it's important to understand that. When I travel, it's important for me to understand what states have reciprocity and which ones don't, how I can carry in different states and how I cannot. And then just the safety of your firearm, you have to be comfortable with it. I think it's important when you decide, you go in and you hold one in your hand when you're purchasing it, and you have to feel comfortable with it, because if you carry full time, it kind of like becomes your best friend, or like you guys probably don't wear earrings, but like your earrings or your wristwatch or something that you wear or use all the time. So you want to be comfortable with it, and you want to understand how it works. I mean, if you have a semi-automatic or a clip, you want to understand, if it gets jammed, how to take care of that or how to fix it. I have both. I carry a revolver most of the time because there's less chance of error with that. So it's just important to understand all of that, be comfortable with it. But that training, you just, there's not enough can be said about training. Do I think training should be mandatory? No, not really. I don't. But I think that as a responsible citizen, that you should take it upon yourself to make sure that you have the training. I don't think the government should have to tell you every move to make, when to make it, and how to make it.
Sure.
With great freedom comes great responsibility.
Yeah, I remember when Ron Nate, when he was really working on constitutional carry, I had a chance to talk to him, and I brought that very thing up because I'm a firearms instructor, and I spent a lot of time teaching people how to shoot from little kids to little old grandmas with brand new guns, and my concern with him was that I was like, well, what are we going to do about training? And he said, Steve, we can't regulate the training. Like, you can't say they have to have training to carry the gun, and so I kind of had to agree with him because he's absolutely right. You can't legislate a right, like regulate a right. I mean, it is what it is.
Exactly. And I when we start talking about that, and we even look at other areas, it seems like the more you expect the government to do for you, the more you expect the government to do, and we see that with a lot of social programs and everything else. And that's not the proper role of government. We live in a free society, and we maintain that free society by accepting those freedoms and then accepting responsibility and accountability for our actions.
Yep.
Because we can't legislate honesty. We can't legislate morality. We can't legislate good behavior. All we do is we legislate punishment for violating good behavior. If you speed, we can't stop. You can't stop someone from speeding, but if they speed and cause an accident, then there's a punishment for that.
There's consequences. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of putting it. That's really all you can do. You can't, and we've talked about it before, is you can't necessarily stop somebody from doing something that they want to do, whether it's with a firearm or whether it's a knife or a blunt instrument or whatever. I mean, anything can be a weapon. It's the intent behind it that really, really makes the act happen. And, sometimes firearms in the hands of the right people can actually, maybe save life or preserve life,
Exactly.
Kind of towards what Steve said about the training and the constitutional carry stuff. So I've always had the debate, and even I've said this to Steve, is we can advocate for training all of the time, and that's what we should be doing, but we can't force people to get the training in order to use their right to carry a gun. But as fellow citizens and fellow gun owners and advocates of carrying a gun, we can help to educate people on why training is so important and help them become advocates of safe gun ownership as well. And the government can't keep us safe all the time. They can't, like you said, legislate safety and
they're really bad
decisions. At it. They can't make us make good decisions, but they can deter us from making bad decisions. But the training side, we're advocates for training on the show 100%. We probably talk about training somewhat in every episode, and how important it is and why you should get the training. And I didn't grow up similar to Christy. I didn't grow up in a household where anyone carried a gun. We did hunting, and we shot whistle pigs in the desert, and that was about it. We had a rifle, a revolver, shotgun, and a .22. And it wasn't until I just fell into the firearms industry that I started to be an advocate of carrying a gun and concealed carry and going down this path of where I've become what I would consider a concealed carry expert, not a training expert, but an expert on carrying a gun and how to carry a gun and how to safely do it. And I never would have seen myself on this path if it wasn't for people advocating safe gun ownership and carrying a gun for personal protection. Mm-hmm. Like I come from no law enforcement, no military family, none of that. And so here to where I'm talking about carrying a gun for personal protection and on a daily basis, educating people on how to do that and how to do it safely.
And it is important. It's just like driving the car. A vehicle can be a dangerous thing. You're moving 5,000 or 6,000 pounds down the road at 80 miles an hour. It can do a lot of damage. It's important to understand your vehicle and know how to drive it. But a gun is so much more personal that I believe the training is even more important.
Agreed. Yeah.
Well, and the thing about a car, the thing about a car and something like that is you get everyday experience and you get practice with that vehicle daily from basically the time you're old enough to remember, because people use those all the time. When it comes to carrying a firearm for defense or even just owning a firearm, we're not shooting those every day. We're not interacting with them every day. Even someone like me and Steve and Mark who carry guns every single day, the only thing we're doing with that is putting it on and knowing that it's there. And then maybe a few times a week or a few times a month, we'll actually get to practice with it. So it's so much more important that when you do that, that you're getting something out of it. Because I drive every single day and I don't think twice about it. When I go out to the range to go shooting, I deliberately am thinking about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
That's a really good point. And to add to that, every morning when I get up, this is going to sound like a girl thing, but depending on what I wear, I can either carry on my person or I can carry in my bag. But what I've tried to make a habit of doing is the gun stays on my nightstand at night by my bed. So when I either put it on my person or put it in what I'm going to carry, I always think I'll go through in my mind, the safety issues involved. If it's in my handbag, I never leave it alone. I always know where that weapon is. If it's on my person, I'm always conscious of where it is, and I'm always reviewing those safety issues and, what I'll do, what I might do in my mind, whenever the opportunity comes up mentally for me to do that. Because I think that's part, like you said, we drive the car every day. So it's on our mind, it just becomes a natural thing. And I think if you're going to carry, carry on your person, concealed or open or in whatever way, but carry on your person, you should make it a habit of reviewing that in your mind so that you're always conscious of the safety element that has to be involved there and what you're doing. Always check that firearm to make sure that, it's either on safety or, do I have a round in the chamber? Where is that gun at as far as that area, like my revolver, check and make sure that I know what's in the cylinder, because I have different rounds in different places in that cylinder for different reasons. And I in my mind, I want to make sure and physically examine it and make sure that they're where I want them to be. In my semi-automatic, I do the same thing. I check, make sure, do I have a round in the chamber? If there is, and there's never is, unless I have, actually racked around and that's what I want it to be. But I check it just to make sure, because we're human and we can make mistakes. And sometimes with a firearm, you don't get to make a mistake twice. It's deadly.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, and complacency is really the enemy of, of safety. If you're not thinking about it every time and being conscious, like you say, you're being with your firearm, you can get into a dangerous situation real fast.
You really can. I know a mom who carries in her purse all the time, and one of her kids got in there to get gum or something out, and there's the gun, and the child got the gun out, And luckily the mom was right there. But she said, that was such a huge reminder to me that I got so comfortable with having it in there that she didn't think about it being in there on such a conscious level as she should. She said, I will never make that mistake again. Never.
Yeah. Like you said, you don't necessarily get a second chance to make that kind of mistake,
Nope. It can be pretty final.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, I think this is pertinent is that, I think caring for women is a little bit different than caring for men. And I don't think we spend enough time talking about caring for women specifically, mainly because we don't have an accurate resource, somebody who actually is a woman who carries, to talk about that. Can you talk about maybe what you think the differences are, carrying as a woman as opposed to carrying as a man, or, just maybe the unique challenges that you face that way?
Well, I know for me, and again, this sounds really girly, but it's just a fact of life. Women's clothing aren't designed for women to carry a firearm. So that's what you do. Like if you wear slacks or jeans or something like that, yes, you're okay. Or a belt, yes, you're okay. So I have a couple of different holsters for different needs, depending on, what I'm wearing. I have one of those wraparounds that, if I'm just wearing something loose or whatever, I can stick it in. Accessibility is really important. I mean, if you have to wear it under a bunch of clothing that you have to move the clothing to get to it, you've missed it, because you have literally seconds, maybe only 1 or 2 seconds to get that firearm out to where you need it to be so that you can use it when you need to. So if you're having to dig around and look for it or dig around to get to it, it can be too late. So I think that's something that women need to think about if they're going to carry. If you're going to carry it in your handbag, like the story I just shared with you, you need to always be conscious and have control of that bag and know exactly where it is and have it next to you. Number one, so that someone else doesn't get it. Number two, so that when you need it, you have it. Mm-hmm. So, men, you always have on a belt and jeans typically, even dress clothes, even a man's suit and stuff. They're just more conducive to being able to carry. So for women, I think there are added considerations for that. I think another thing that's important for women is to get a firearm that fits you. I had a 45 and a 9mm, and I'm getting a little bit older now, and my hands aren't as strong as they used to be. And my 9 got so I couldn't work the slide anymore.
Sure.
And my brother kind of made fun of me, and he said, "Oh, you're just getting to be a wimp, But be that as it may, that's not the point. The point is that the firearm has to fit my hand, and I have to be able to operate it quickly. I mean, I can't stand there and struggle with it when I need it.
Right, for sure.
So I have a featherweight 38 revolver that I carry, and it fits my hand. And then the other gun that I carry, it's small, it's a 380, and it fits my hand, and I can work it. So I think for women, it's good to take advice from the men in our life about what we should carry, but it's so important that firearm fits you. Yes. And then the other thing is you need to fire it. You need to shoot that gun often, a lot, especially when you first decide to carry and you first start being around firearms, so that you're not scared of it, so that you know what to expect when you pull the trigger.
So this is a perfect opportunity to kind of review some of the stuff that we say all the time, which is anytime I have someone come into the shop, because we do custom holsters in my shop, and when someone is asking what gun they should get, if they're a new gun owner, I always send them to the range and say, the gun you should get is the gun that you can shoot and that you will carry. Don't worry about what your husband or your boyfriend or the guy at the gun counter tells you to get. Go to the range, demo 5 or 6 guns, and find the one that fits your hand, that fits the carry type that you're most commonly going to use, and that you can shoot. Yeah. It doesn't matter what I recommend. It doesn't matter what Steve recommends. It definitely doesn't matter if Mark tells you to get a Walther.
No.
Get out and shoot the gun that fits you. And then you touched on the types of carry for women. And so I get a lot of women in my shop that ask those same questions that you kind of hit on here, which was women's carry type is different. And so I'm a partner with one of those wrap companies that you talked about. It's Misconcealed. I sell a lot of those in my shop for women, as well as beltless carry options, which means you can't carry a big 45. You have to carry something that the weight will allow you to carry without a belt. And then also something that Christy touched on was off-body carry, so bag carry, which I'm not a big advocate of. But I personally as well have to do that sometimes. And you have to be conscious of where your bag goes, who gets into your bag, and who has access to your bag. Mm-hmm. So those are all things that I touch on with people when they come in. And I'm glad to hear that that's also things that other people are thinking about and talking about as well, because they are so important.
Well, I just don't think you can advocate that enough. And I think a really good resource for women who want to carry are other women that carry. Women that are, that your same size and shape and maybe even age. Talk to them and see what they carry. Because
and I will say one thing is that a lot of times when I'm coaching women on what to carry, how to carry, and what to carry, I'll tell them, like, I know you guys don't wear belts all the time and you don't wear jeans all the time, but sometimes you might have to, and you might be able to touch on this too, Christy, is sometimes you have to dress according to what you want to do. So if you want to carry a gun, you might have to change some of the outfits that you decide to wear if you're going to carry a gun a certain way. And sometimes I have to explain that to where, if you want to carry a gun every single day, you might have to change a little bit of the clothes that you wear to accommodate that.
Exactly. And then you'll have to get used to a different look, because no matter how hard you try, if you're carrying on your person, it's going to show.
Yeah, skin tight. I mean, even if yoga pants are going to show a gun.
Yeah, even if it's under a jacket, or even if you wear a belt with a dress or a beltless holster like you're talking, it's going to show.
Yeah.
If a person looks and knows what they're seeing, they're going to know that it's there. And you just have to accept that's what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and the gun.
People might not know it's a gun, but there will be a bump there.
Well, that's where we go with, like, if you're going to wear a belly band holster and a dress, you're probably not going to carry a Glock 34 with a 20 round mag, because obviously I'm going to know that's a gun. So that's where it's going to be like, okay, if I'm going to dress this certain way and I'm going to wear this holster, I'm probably going to have to get comfortable shooting a much smaller gun so that I can hide that and conceal that.
Right. But and even no matter how small it is, it still takes up space. So I guess
absolutely.
Can you see what I'm getting at here? That
yes.
Still going to be
and that's something that I also explain, is like it doesn't matter if you're putting just a magazine or anything that adds bulk to your body. It's gonna be seen if your clothes are tight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the gun industry has really done a disservice up until recently. I mean, now they're finally making apparel that's geared to the lady shooters, but for years it was just grandpa's vest that you would stick. You see those old guys walking around big box sporting goods stores with those vests on, then they're carrying a gun in there because it's the only thing they're used to carrying. But women were kind of left in the dark for years about the apparel choice. But there are companies now actually geared just for women shooters, which is about time, because it's needed to happen for a long time.
Yeah.
I agree. And that, I think that's a part of, women become, not that we haven't always been independent, but it gives us an independence that maybe we didn't have before, that we relied on other people a little more to provide our safety and stuff. And I'm not trying to sound feminist or anything like that.
No, there's a lot of women-owned. There's a lot of women-owned companies now within the firearms industry, especially within the concealed carry niche of the firearms industry. The one that I mentioned that I'm partners with, Miss Concealed, that's a woman-owned and operated business, and it's catered towards women's concealed carry. And I could name off 20 holster companies right now that I know are owned and operated by women for women.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. It just is, and it's just be comfortable with your firearm, and don't be afraid to carry one. But get the training and get comfortable with it, because like you say, now there are so many options that even 10 years ago we didn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think you have a couple more questions, and we're probably about ready to close it up. But we have some important questions to ask you, Christy, before we call it a day.
Well, so one thing I didn't tell you, Christy, is every time we have a guest, we have 5 core questions that we ask in there. Let's just get to get to know who's on the show a little bit better, a little bit more about you. But before we get to those 5 questions, one that came to my mind as we were talking about the Small Arms Protection Act is I was wondering about, and maybe not necessarily that bill, but any other pro-gun bills. Are you seeing a lot of support from the law enforcement agencies throughout the state, like the Sheriff's Association, the Police Chiefs Association? Are you seeing support there?
I have a letter of support from Code 3-1, and they're an organization of retired law enforcement. You would think that there would be more support. I think individually, a lot of law enforcement officers do, because I've had like Boise City Police ask me about it over the summer. Are you going to get this done? I have sheriffs that are supportive as individuals. I haven't gotten any support yet from organizations like Fraternal Order of Police. I haven't gotten anything from them. The Sheriff's Association, Idaho Sheriff's Association, I haven't gotten anything from them. I've sent it out to all of them, but I haven't gotten any response. On an individual basis, though, I believe there's a lot of support in the law enforcement arena. But as far as the organizations, we haven't gotten anything yet. And typically, it's pretty tough, even on constitutional carry. As an organization, last year when we did the final part of constitutional carry, I believe it was the FOP, they said, we probably won't come out and support, but we won't come out against it.
Interesting. Huh.
Which I find that frustrating in a way. Like, I guess I understand as an organization, it's hard for them to come out and make one solid stand, because at some point that's going to bite them in the butt later on. But I really wish that whether they're part of the organization or not, that they would just do it. Like, they would just, if it's something that the majority of their membership believes in, they just support it. But
I don't see why it would come back and bite them. I think it would be important for them to support it, because the oath is to defend and protect and uphold the Constitution, and that's what here. But like the Fraternal Order of Police, and I'm not trying to pick on them, but they're kind of a national organization, and so they maybe get some directive or whatever direction from their national part of it. But in my mind, to me, with any of these organizations, any of the law enforcement organizations, I can see no reason why they would not just support it.
Yeah, and that's why it's frustrating, because it completes their oath of office. Like, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly. I mean, the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, 4th, 5th, 10th, anything in the Constitution, that's what it is. I mean, it's there, it's plain, it's simple. It doesn't need to be convoluted or be made into something that it's not.
Yeah.
The founders wrote that so that someone with even a 6th grade education could understand what our rights are, what was delineated, what the proper rule of government is. It wasn't meant to be rocket science. It wasn't meant to be interpreted by an attorney. We're asked to follow it. We're asked to follow the law. They should be in plain, simple language so that we know where we stand all the time.
Can we clone you and just put like a whole bunch of you in the state house?
Amen to that.
Gosh.
At least can we send her to Washington? Can she be the one that represents us there?
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
We just need more of you, Christy.
Conversation for another day.
Well, Steve, I think it's time for the 5 questions if you're ready.
Yeah,
you can give me a list, so if I think there's a red light in one of these, I might tell you.
Well,
they are very straightforward. I had to answer these 3 times when I first came on the show.
Okay.
And I promise you, they're only as personal as you want the answers to be. Like,
okay, I'll be brave.
There's nothing scary. There's no gotcha questions or nothing. Like, they're pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
All right, the first one. What experience in your life has been the most influential and why?
Being a mom. I think as a woman or even as a man, being a parent is the highest calling that there is. You learn more, you hurt more, you're more frustrated, but more joyful than any other thing I've ever experienced in my life. For me, that has been the greatest influence and the greatest calling in my life. And then the other thing is to have faith in God.
Awesome.
Those have been 2 driving forces in my life.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Number 2. So you just won the lottery, and it's a ridiculous amount of money. What are you going to do with the money, and why?
Wow, there are so many things. I want to help people, but I want to help them help themselves and fulfill the measure of their creation. I don't want it to be, like you teach a man to fish and they'll always eat rather than to just give them a fish. So I would like to set something up so that people could learn to better themselves, have to be in a position where they could figure that out and better themselves. I've never really thought about that because I have the worst luck of any person who's ever gambled in the world. I would have to put a lot of thought into that.
I never think about that because I've played the lottery 4 times in my entire life.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are gamblers here.
I've probably played a couple more than 4, but I never win. I mean, I'm the most unluckiest gambler in the world, so I don't even think about it.
Well, Dave Ramsey calls it the stupid tax.
Oh, okay, that works.
All right. Number 3. This is a good one. What is your biggest fear?
Wow, these are some really deep questions. Who came up with this?
Steve did.
They're much more personal than I remember them being.
Deepest fear.
Well,
I can't think of anything right now that I fear. I mean, there are some things I fear on a superficial level because one of my things that I fear right now is I fear that my grandchildren will not know the world that I knew. I fear that my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I don't know if you're old enough to be to that point, if not your children, I fear that they will not know the America that I knew, that they won't know the America that my grandparents worked so hard to get here, that, I'm second-generation American, and I that right now, I fear that because we knew a world and a life that is unlike any in the history of the world. And I think
that's
right
a great
now,
answer.
That's my fear.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer
because that's my fear as well. Like that's a great answer.
I think we all agree with you on that one. All right.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I just say you're knocking them out of the park.
They're not too bad, are they? See, it's not scary.
No. It's just, you want to think a little bit before you speak.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we should give these to people before they come on so they can prepare.
This is better because this is honest.
Yeah, that's exactly why.
Honest.
Yep, you got it.
All right, number 4. What would you say is your biggest achievement?
Being a mom.
Nice. Being a parent's like you were saying before, it's difficult and rewarding at the same time.
Well, it is. When you have that first baby, and you, at least for me, and I held him in my arms and I looked at him, and the weight of that responsibility for another life. If I don't feed it, if I don't change it and bathe it and take care of it, when they're first born, they're totally dependent on you.
Yeah.
And that is such a huge responsibility.
Yeah, it is awesome. I wouldn't trade being a dad. It's worth it.
Yeah, I'm the only one who doesn't know that responsibility or joy yet, but it'll happen sooner or later.
Yet. All right. This is the last one, and this is my most favorite question, and I know how I would answer it, but since I'm the one asking the questions, I don't have to. So, like I said, this is an awesome question. Who would you consider to be your greatest hero?
Jesus.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, great answer. Can't go wrong with that one.
Well, no. He made it so that all of the stupid things we do, we have an opportunity to repent and make better on it.
Greater love hath no man, right?
Exactly. Yep. And the example of that, because in a nutshell, what really is more important than that?
I agree.
There you go.
Wholeheartedly.
Well, I think this is one of my favorite episodes that we've done.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic one. So,
yes, it's been very informative. We've got to discuss a lot of things that I've been getting a ton of questions about locally in the state of Idaho and with the state of how things are going in the government. So I'm really glad that you came on the show, and I'm glad that you answered our questions, and the stories that you told were amazing, and you blew those questions out of the park. So I am very grateful that you came on the show tonight.
Well, I'm very grateful that you asked me, gentlemen. Thank you. It has been an honor. I am truly grateful.
Yes, thank you so much for your time and all that, and spending some time with us and sharing your stories with us. I think they're inspirational and educational as well. Just if a lot of people I don't think realize how government works, and that your elected officials are a lot more accessible than you would think. And, here we are.
Well, they should be, because we're just people. I put my jeans on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And,
right.
If at another time in the future you would like to do something, maybe whiteboard or something on how the process works, or, anytime I can answer any questions, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me.
Sure. Well, thank you.
That would be great, because I think now, sorry, Steve, I think now is a time where more people are interested in, we learned this stuff growing up in school, but I don't think that a lot of people pay too much attention. But in the recent past, I think a lot more people have started paying attention to what you have to do to be involved in your local government, to be involved in the process, how to reach out to those people. And I'm a huge advocate when I'm meeting new people about, you have to stay involved. You have to pay attention to what's going on, because at this point in our history, that could never happen in Idaho statement is not true. Like, if you don't stand up and pay attention to what's going on, anything can happen anywhere. So educating people on how the process works and getting to meet people like you, Christy, I think is great. And it puts more reassurance to me to know that people like you are in the Capitol building here, making those defenses for us. So I'm really excited for people to hear this episode.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's, and you really touched on something important there. We think that this is Idaho and we're a red state, but we're more purple than we really believe.
Yeah.
And just because someone has a certain letter behind their name on that ballot, that doesn't mean that they will hold true to those concepts and principles. So I think we're late. We're late on that game, because we've trusted, we've put people in office and we've trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we have to be ever vigilant. We can't just trust. We have to know who we vote for. We have to know what they'll stand for. If they get there and they don't represent us and what you would do if you were in that office, then we need to find other people.
And I think with the spotlight that's been on what's gone on in Washington in the last little while, I think people are starting to realize that and directing their focus towards their local state governments is what I think is important right now. And I've been explaining that a lot over the last couple of months, is that, because everyone asks me like HR 127 and all the stuff that's going on nationally. And I'm like, my focus is what's going on in Idaho, because my only influence is what's going on in Idaho. And so taking that spotlight that has gone on nationally to the federal government and saying, hey, move that spotlight to your local government and make your voice heard where it can be heard, which is locally. If that's your city council, which for me, that's where I'm focused, is the Meridian City and the local government here where my business is, and then moving up to the state level. And then if need be, we'll go national. But I don't think that as a citizen of a state, your voice is heard any more than it is in your local environment.
Yeah.
It's not. And people do not give enough credit to school boards, to the school board positions. Like you said, the city councils, your county commissioners, those are so important. And you can see by what's happening in Boise City how important that is.
Yeah, and if you want to get
some of the stuff coming out of there.
Yeah, people want to get involved, and I just say, show up to the school board meetings, show up to the city council meetings, be present and understand what's going on. That's the first step to getting involved. I mean, you're not going to become the president. Steve's not going to become the president in 2024 if he starts thinking about politics in 2023.
Yeah.
Right. And you think about it, though, what really is more important on a local level than what your kids are being taught?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's a great
school
point.
board members, they have to be more than just show up at the meeting, have the superintendent run down the list of bills that need to be paid and say, okay, write the check. They need to review the curriculum. They need to know what's being taught in those classrooms, because I've heard some stories, some really scary stories from little tiny schools about stuff that's happened in the classrooms. Like one teacher assigned a writing assignment in a junior class, English class, about white privilege. And this is in a school where there were only like 2 white kids in the class. And these kids had grown up together. They didn't know they were any different from each other. They were all buddies. There had never been any separation, no problem, no thought of class, no thought of any of this stuff until that teacher made that assignment.
Well, and I think now with the online learning system, that parents have started to open their eyes to some of the curriculum that their kids are learning. Because even me, like when I watch my son take some of these assignments, and I'm going, what are you teaching my son? Because I'm not okay with that. And that's because I got so disconnected from what was actually going on. And that's so.
We trusted.
Yeah, we trusted, and now I think that enough people have seen, that are like us, have seen what their kids are seeing, and they're like, hey, I'm not okay with that. What do I do? Well, you start showing up, you start getting involved, you start speaking up and going to those meetings. And if you can't be heard, then you start running for those positions on those boards. And once you've gone there, then if you want to go further, you move up the chain.
Yep.
Exactly. And, another good place to start are like your precinct committee positions. A lot of people don't even know we have precincts, voting precincts, and they don't know that there are precinct committees in every voting precinct. And that's another good place to start, because then you're more active and more conscious of who's running for state office and who's running for local office in your partisan races. And if your races are not partisan, it's even more important to know who you're voting for, what their background is, what they've stood for, where they've served before, and the impact they've had in positions they've had before. Because even though you should never trust just because they're an R or a D or an I, you need to know who you're voting for and the choices and decisions they're making in office.
Yeah, I've made that mistake on this side of the state. Had friends of mine that have run for office, and I supported, and they got elected, and then, and you know who they are, so I'm not going to say their names, but I've been pretty vocal about how disappointed I am with them, and I don't think I'll be invited to dinner to their house anymore. But it's just really frustrating, and I've even told them, "Hey, I'll help you with any of these questions," and then I just get a cold shoulder about it, and people you think you know, but you really don't.
Right. And I've been guilty of that as well. I used to always just vote party all the way down the whole time, even if I didn't know who the people were. And now, like, I would never do that now that I've seen how some Republicans might not be so Republican.
Yeah.
It's a little more complicated nowadays.
Find good people. Find people who will really, really honor that oath of office. It's up to us to find those people, support them in their run, support them when they get in office. That there's just, it's so important. I can't stress enough how really important that is, to find the good ones, work hard to get them there, and then work hard to keep them there. And then the other thing is I don't believe, people will say to me, well, how long do you think you're going to serve? And I'll say, well, maybe I won't run again. You never know, because I don't believe these offices were meant to be homesteaded.
Sure. Agreed.
That
100%.
Agreed.
So I have one last question before we go, because we're starting to run long. But so, Christy, if we were to ask another representative to come on and speak with us, who would you recommend that we asked?
Ben Adams has a really intriguing story and background. He's young. This is his first term. I think he has a good story. He ran the Protect the Guard bill, and it didn't make it out of committee. Mm-hmm. But it's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating story behind why he ran that bill. He's one that I think would be a good one. On the other end of the spectrum, Regina Bear, she's a senator. Her husband served, her son served, and now she served. And she is very, very conservative, and she's pretty sharp.
Cool.
Well, there you go, Steve. Those are your next two objectives.
Guess who I wrote down on the notepad?
Perfect. Well, you don't have me on video, so I can't see what you're doing tonight.
So cool. Well, I think we can call that one a day. Thank you so much, Senator Zito, for spending some time with us. Really appreciate it. It means a lot, and we appreciate you being with us. So hopefully we can make some traction on that on your bill that's being pushed forward, and we'll keep an eye on it and keep everybody updated about what's going on with it.
Perfect. And just, any questions I can answer for you, or any way I can assist you, let me know, and God bless.
Yeah. And if anybody does want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
My email, I'll give you my personal email, ChristyZito@gmail.com. And then my phone number is 208-590-4633. I sometimes, if it's not a number that shows a name with the caller ID, I'll just let it go to voicemail, because I'm sick and tired of being told I need to get new insurance or that my car warranty's expired.
Yeah, we're trying to reach you about your extended warranty.
Yeah.
So is that a phone number? Just to be clear, before this goes on, is that a phone number that you want people to contact you on? It's my cell phone number. It's the only one I've got. It's on my website. It's on my government page. It's okay. I'm accessible. It just is what it is, and I think I owe it to the people of the state to be available. And if it ever gets so that it gets more calls than I can handle, I'll get a different private number. But that will always be a number where my fellow citizens can reach me.
Cool.
That's amazing.
And I'm on Facebook. There's that too.
Sure. Cool. Well, thank you again so much. We'll call it that one. If you want to get a hold of us, let us know. podcast@ihishooting.com. And you can also find us at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to get a hold of Senator Zito, we can put you in touch with her as well. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys. Be safe.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe out there.
Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.